guys, welcome aboard the Super Tenere. We're going to go for a little ride, and in this video I'm going to be talking about the history of the Yamaha Tenere. Not so much the history of the Super Tenere, but it all blends together. I've been researching the Tenere and I didn't realize how much history there was in the Tenere line. It's very much like the Africa Twin. You know, this is really the bastard child of the Tenere line, now that I think about it. This is a great bike. I really love this bike. Probably my favorite, comfortable, just do everything sort of bike. For me, this fits me like a glove. But along the Tenere line, when you look at the Tenere, I have to admire the Tenere 700 quite a bit. And the reason is the Tenere 700, the new contemporary Tenere 700, really is the Super Tenere. Oh, I'm gonna go for it here. And the reason I say that is because it has a lot more in common with the Tenere heritage than this one. You know, this one was made just to compete with the BMW GS. It doesn't make any pretense of being this off-roader. This bike is just a really good shaft-driven, very large, very heavy touring adventure model, and that's why Yamaha made it. It wanted to compete with the GS. And in the United States, it's not very popular because I think most people that have money, they get the GS. It's a little bit lower weight and more horsepower, and it's got I think the guys that have money, they also want to show it. This bike doesn't really give you any props in the Starbucks when you're riding. Well done. Those guys are hardcore. Today's chilly. Today's like 46 degrees. This is a weird thing that guys do once in a while. They just get these like 5-inch exhausts. Look at that thing. It's humongous. That freaking humongous exhaust. Look at that. Look at that thing. Holy cow. That's a that's so big. You have to look back at 1978 or around the 70s. They had the first bike really was the Yamaha XT500. That was an extremely popular bike at the time, and it was a single cylinder 500cc bike, and I believe the car was 1978, and that bike did really well. I don't know if it won or anything, but there was a Frenchman named Cyril. He did really well on the XT500. That bike was extremely popular, and one thing you're going to notice is that the Tenere is extremely popular in France. French people love the Tenere, and the Italians. Those two guys, I don't know why, but they're also the ones that seem to gravitate to these long desert races where the Tenere really shined. The Paris Dakar was getting faster and faster every year, so they needed a bike that was more capable. First, they bumped up the displacement of the XT500 into like an XT550, but eventually the first Tenere was the XT600Z. So they had the XT600, that was like a dirt bike version, I believe, but the Z version was the Tenere. That was a 600cc engine, and it first got that name, I believe it was in 1982, and it became extremely popular. It was a great bike, very reliable, and here's the thing, the kicker. Even going back to like the XT500, it was a dead reliable bike. Only Honda and BMW at the time, that's when BMW was making like very good bikes, was in the first decade of the Paris Dakar. And then, of course, they started to make all of these electronic gizmos and catering to Starbucks going people. You know, people buy bikes based on passion. So that's why the Tenere became so popular in Europe, and specifically France. It was a good bike, but it was still a single cylinder. And the first time I believe you saw the multi-cylinder was in 1989 with the Yamaha Super Tenere. That was a really cool bike. Even before, when they had a single cylinder, they had the Tenere line, which is a single cylinder. The Super Tenere was a multi-cylinder parallel twin engine, and it's kind of cool that even this one I'm riding now has a parallel twin engine. But that Super Tenere of 1989 to 1996 is so cool looking. I've always loved that style, the African twin style bikes. You know, I believe that Tenere was the Super Tenere, and the Tenere beat Honda to that classic adventure style. A guy named Peter Halsen, I believe, that started to coin the whole adventure segment of motorcycling. I've always assumed it was more of the Africa Twin, but it was the Tenere. So he coined that whole adventure thing, and he is quoted as saying something like, the time is finally here for more motorcycles to be vehicles for adventure. And that kind of, he's the one that really started the multi-cylinder bike craze of off-road bikes that were capable of going 100 miles per hour on the desert flats for a very long period. So, you know, even going back to 1989 and the XC500, the important thing about crossing a desert was reliability. A bike that wasn't durable could not cross a desert. And think about it, Yamaha even now has a reputation and stats that back it up that it's more reliable than Honda. Honda is very reliable, but Yamaha, even with the Super Tenere, the Tenere, and the XT500, were these bikes that people knew would be able to finish a race in the desert. Tenere with a multi-cylinder engine in the car, won I believe 7 times. That's an incredible feat, and usually it came like in second and third and fourth place. So riders were just going balls out with the Super Tenere. Look at it. You know, I like leaves, especially these old ones, by the way. If you get one of these old ones, you can get them for like 5,000. But now with the whole gas spiking, they've gone up to 8,000. But the problem with these is that their batteries, they seem to die. Oh my God, look at this guy. You're going 36 miles an hour on a country road. Are you serious, man? Well, I know there's a passing lane coming up. Whoa, look at this stretch of road here. Let's do a little bit of a speed run here. Oh, is that a car? Don't know what kind of, that's a cop or not. The Tenere line, that was like a 1991 Tenere that had more plastic, and that was another version of the Tenere in like 96. But to me, the more important Tenere is really the Super Tenere of 1989 to 1996. That's an incredible bike. And even now, I would love to have one of those. I might have to buy one in Europe. You know, the weird thing about the Tenere in the 80s is that we never got the Tenere in North America. But we did get a bike that had the same engine, I believe. It's the TT600. It was basically just a dirt bike version of the Tenere, with a little bit more off-road worthy. Tenere 660, single cylinder. It's more of a KLR 650 killer. I really like the styling, but you know, I don't really like the single cylinders a lot. That bike had the engine that was in the Aprilia Pegaso, and I've ridden the Pegaso in Europe. Very boring engine. In 2010, that's when Yamaha released the Super Tenere XTZ 1200. This one is a 2012, but it came here late as per usual. You know, Europe and the rest of the world always get stuff earlier. But the Super Tenere that I'm riding now, it's a little bit of a bastard child, because it's a 1200cc super heavy shaft driven bike. The adventure bikes are the only growing segment of the motorcycling world. They're so popular, and for good reason. These bikes are comfortable, easy to ride. You can go from one adventure bike to the other and they feel almost identical in the way they handle. But if you go from an adventure bike or whatever to a sport bike, you see like the big difference. It's as if there's a bigger learning curve. One of the interesting things about the Tenere is that Frenchmen really love that bike. The Tenere line is loved by the Frenchmen, and I think a lot has to do because a lot of the French people that I've known, they were very much into racing. I mean, the entire European continent loves motorcycle racing, and they love specifically rally racing. And whenever you combine it with like these long like hundreds and thousands of miles of races that involve endurance, they like that even more, and I like it. The car is probably the only type of race that I really like. I think the Tenere 700 really is the Super Tenere. This one is like the bastard child of the Tenere line. Doesn't really have a lot in common with the lineage, but they should have called this the Hyper Tenere. You know, just made like a very large, very fast bike. I mean, this thing just sounds so good. Oh, I hit the rev limiter. Well, anyway, guys, I hope you guys enjoyed the video and you learned a bunch of stuff about the Tenere line. I've always admired it, but I admired it mainly because it looks cool. Now I know a little bit more about the history, and I have to say I'm very impressed with the Tenere line. But hopefully you guys learned something. I appreciate riding with me, and I'll see you in the next video. Thanks, bye. Oh, by the way, did you know that Tenere means desert in the language of the Tuareg people in Saharan Africa? I think that's kind of neat. And another neat thing is that the blue that they wear as their typical outfits is the blue that the Tenere is. I'm kind of stuck here. The cops won't bother me.